right, good evening. Scott Poulin, I was Director of Operations and Finance. Myself will be co-presenting the short-term facilities plan, and be getting into a lot of the details of this plan this evening, and explain why we are presenting this plan and some of the possible solutions that we're bringing to the board tonight in order to do this. So the agenda for this presentation tonight is to look at the board-adopted long-range capital plan just briefly, just to remind everyone that there is one. Short-term facilities plan, this is our proposed plan for the board to consider for Mabel A. Wilson School and Greeley Middle School. The cost of this plan and Mabel A. Wilson School's revolving renovation project update. We'll just update you quickly on that. So the short-term plan that we're presenting tonight is obviously linked back to the strategic plan, which goes back to 2018, which the board approved at that time, and that this board has been extending since we were getting out of the pandemic, and we're not in a position to start a new strategic plan. This one has been extended. And the priority is to review the district's long-term elementary education program and structure, including options for pre-kindergarten optimal grade spans and facilities that address projected enrollment increases over the next decade. So everything we're talking about and have been talking about in terms of a new primary school in this district that went to referendum in November is all tied back to the strategic plan. So I won't go through this. This is your long-range major capital plan. There were different priority levels in this plan. This was approved by the Board of Directors back in May of 2022. And you can see priority 1 is in green, which is building a new primary school. This will need to be updated, obviously now, given the vote in November. And then along with that, improving the Mabel A. Wilson School, which was also part of that proposed bond back in November, will need to be updated. And just a reminder that there were 2 other priorities in here, 2 and 3, including an artificial turf field, renovating maintenance in the field house, and renovating Greeley High School in a number of areas. Weren't tied to the bond that went out, obviously, in November, but were things that we had put before the board for approval and were approved as part of the long-range plan over a period of time. So just reminding you that that plan will need to be updated. Why are we in need of a new plan? And this is a plan for the short-term facility needs for the next 5 years. Obviously, we had a referendum vote in November 2022 that did not pass, which requires us now to come up with a contingency plan for our students and staff for the next 5 years. And I say 5 years for a reason. If the board were to choose to go out to referendum, I assume it wouldn't be within the next year. But if it was within the next year or so, it would take a year of planning. It would take another 2 to 3 years of construction. So that's why we arrived at the 5-year mark and needing to make sure that we have a short-term plan for at least the next 5 years. And then again, obviously tied to this very closely is the long-range plan, and simultaneously, what is the board going to do in the long term? And those discussions, as you know, will be starting next Monday evening to talk about what is the long-term plan. So they're really running 2 different things simultaneously: the short-term plan for 5 years, and then what is the long-term plan for looking again at a new school for the district. So enrollment studies, again, some of these things are just reminders for everyone that we've had 3 different enrollment studies since 2016. 2016, 19, and 2022. Actually, it was March of 2022, about a year ago. All 3 recent studies concluded and debunked the 2009. There were 2 studies back then that showed that the district would be declining over a period of time, and obviously that did not happen. And actually the reverse has been happening for a number of years, and we'll be showing you a little bit more information about that in a moment. And this is a line that the demographer who worked with us on all 3 of these studies has said repeatedly, either publicly and to me as well, saying that this district is a 4-facility district, has been and always will be, and that the district has to prepare for the ups and downs of enrollment and having 4 functioning facilities in our district to serve the students here. And in the interim, we obviously will need a plan, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight, is the next 5 years. So we are proposing that phase 1 would be focusing on Mabel I. Wilson School first. We consider the Mabel Wilson School facility to be most in need of immediate attention. We have obviously given attention to MIW and GMS over the years with modulars, but in terms of taking the modulars that are existing, reconfiguring them now for a longer period of time, we were waiting for the referendum to see what was going to happen, but we now know we've got another 5 years of waiting at least that we need to be prepared for. And Mabel Wilson School exceeded its capacity back in 2015. So it's been 8 years that the 550 student mark, which was back in 2015, was exceeded, first exceeded, so 8 years. The current enrollment is up 225 students since that time. So over the last 8 years, that school has gained 225 students consistently. The main building has undergone, at the beginning of that phase, we weren't sure if this was a bubble or if this was a consistent increase in enrollment. And Mr. Poulin and facility staff, Don Foster, and we had contractors come in and did a lot of work inside the building to try to make space within the Mabel I. Wilson School building at that time, and quickly realized that this was becoming a trend and we were running out of space in the main building early on. And that's when we started resorting to modular units, which we've had since 2016 on the grounds. The main building is cramped, as many of you will find out if you come to the board. It goes back to school tomorrow at Mabel I. Wilson School. You'll see cramped spaces in that building. You'll see many modular units. There are 14 modular rooms on the grounds right now, with more needed. We do not have enough space at that school, adequate space for allied arts, special education, response to intervention, which is interventions in literacy math for students, gifted and talented, small group work. We don't have conference space. Cafeteria is too small for the number of students we have in the school. The gym is too small as well. When there's assemblies, the students have to be split into half in order to get into the gym for an assembly. So we have a lot of constraints there. And there's a lot of others that I haven't. One example is that we have 8 staff members right now working out of one classroom where they are providing interventions to students, and that's also their home base. They go into classrooms as well during the day. But that's the kind of situation that we're dealing with right now. The modulars have been encroaching on play space more and more every single year over the 8 years, and we've had more and more kids. So we've had more students using the play space, and we've had less and less space for them to be using. This is, I think, a good illustration of just where our cutoff point is in terms of our capacity in the main building at Mabel I. Wilson School and the actual enrollment. And the red line that you see is the 550 student capacity at the Wilson School. And you'll see back in 2014, there were 537 students attending that school. And that was at the lowest point. And that was, again, part of that, those 2009 studies that showed that the school was declining in enrollment. And that occurred slightly up to 2014. And then you'll see that it started to change around 2014 into 15. And you'll obviously see the blue line shows the enrollment increases since then. The arrow is showing where we are today. In 2022-23, 763 students in the school. So you can see that's more than 200 students increase in that building. And next year we're projecting 779 students will be at the Mabel I. Wilson School. The enrollment begins to level off from there, but will slowly, incrementally increase, and we'll be at 822 students in 2028-29. So you can see it's well above the capacity of that facility to be able to handle that enrollment. Thus, we've had all the modular units being put in. But we have patched those modular units in over a period of years. And part of our plan is to talk about how are we going to manage this for the next several years so that it is more optimal and it allows the main building to start breathing. We've got a lot of students in very small places. We've got to start thinking differently, as well as manage the continuing enrollment growth to 822 students. So Scott is going to come up and talk in detail about what this plan looks like.
I may have to do some finger pointing here to explain this tonight, okay, to go through it. But the current modulars that exist on that site, the 10-room cluster is located about here, and then there's 2 modulars that are located in these 2 spaces right now. So what we're proposing is removing these 2 modulars, taking the 10-room cluster that currently exists here, turning it sideways along the building here. So it would literally take over Tuttletown, and it would overlap this area. And what we would end up doing at that point is moving this 12-room cluster in, which would come down into the infield space on the ball field. What would then happen is we would propose the building of a new playground right down in about this area, which is where the other side of the modular would be, and the other side of that ball field. And so we'd be relocating Tuttletown or relocating the playground to this area. Whatever pieces of equipment we can salvage, we will. Other pieces of equipment we're going to have to buy new. The other thing that we'd be looking at doing here is repaving this area. We'll be able to reclaim a lot of this blacktop area in the building and outside the building, which is where the kids are on the hard play surfaces. And what we propose is doing, the painting of the 4 square lines, or whatever, goes along with that. The other piece that we're looking at with this is that over here we would propose, this is where the pre-K area is, we propose a small playground here for the pre-K students so that they could access this area. So in essence what we're doing is we're taking away these 4 classrooms, we're adding another 12-room unit, so the net effect I believe is 8 new classrooms by adding this 12 unit. These would have bathrooms in them, full security systems, and then we'd be talking about how we fence this area and how we set that all up and access it. So that's really what we're proposing right now.
And that would be this summer, right?
That would happen this summer in phase 1. We'd be dealing with Mabel I. Wilson School. So we gain playground, more space, and the pre-K space, and then the paved area, and try to give a little bit of more breathing room within the building.
Could you read the numbers, the existing and proposed playground play area space? It says square feet.
The square footage number? Hang on, let me just take a look at that. So basically, the existing Tuttle ground is about 20,000 square feet. So we'd be able to put 30,000 square feet down here.
Okay.
Sure.
And the pre-K area is 700 square feet?
Yeah, there's a small area that, it used to be here, actually, I think, you folks will remember it quite well. There used to be, when we ran a before and after care program in here, there was a small playground area that was right out in this space. So what we propose is, it's kind of right out the door in the pre-K area, we propose putting in a small playground there. All right, so that's what we're proposing at this point.
So did you mention fence?
Oh, I didn't mention that, no. This fence line that runs around the ball field, what we do is push that fence line out so it's out to here. And so what we gain is we gain more of that outfield space when we did that. So, and try to gain that. I mean, there's a little bit of there's a fire hydrant ridge over here, but we can literally push that out a little bit. So you'd have playground space, and then you'd have all of this open space to play, plus we gain the hard space. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that part.
Do you want to take questions at this point on this phase and then move on, or how do you want?
I think it makes sense.
From the board.
Yeah.
Are they gonna still be able to walk on that sidewalk? We're not getting rid of that sidewalk.
Which sidewalk? This down through here?
No, down at the bottom.
To the right of the 12
Down at the bottom
unit?
by the road, yeah, where the
Oh,
field
no,
is.
the sidewalk still remains.
Okay,
Yeah, the sidewalk will still remain, and we're hoping staff will still have parking space here. What we're gonna end up is just moving the gate so that staff can still come into the modulars.
are we gonna propose trying to cut off that connector, or is that still not doable?
No, that's not in the cards right
Okay.
now for that. The connector road, I think, would create a difficult situation for us with bus traffic, parent traffic, and the whole design of that connector road.
Yeah,
And Jeff and I have had a lot of conversations about this. The whole design of that connector road was to unload the traffic off of Main Street, and anybody coming down into the campus could get to anywhere they needed to go on the campus between the buildings. And I think you'd have one heck of a bottleneck if you eliminated that.
And I know there has been some distractions with the modulars where they're placed right now with the school children outside. That bottom one, MIW 12, I think, yeah, yep, the bottom one. Is that gonna be situated so it's not like a classroom window that's so close to the kids playing and balls hitting? Like, I just wanna know if that's gonna be like a walk ramp.
We actually talked about with Tuttletown moving out here, you don't have them right next to the windows. Now, there still may be some hard space out here,
Yeah,
but and I think it's just unavoidable. And what we'd end up doing though is trying to put, as the educational technicians know out on the playground, kids tend to get underneath these because balls go
Yeah.
through, they break out the skirting underneath the modulars. So we'll put some kind of fencing along there and something here to keep students from, balls going underneath or whatever, so.
Scott, do all of the classrooms, will they all have windows?
Yes. Yeah, they all have windows now. In the 10-room cluster, they have them in the 12-room cluster. They literally come, when they're delivered, they literally come like, this 12-room cluster would come in 6 sections. So, and they come from down south, North Carolina, I believe it is, and they literally are trucked up on site. So what you'll see this summer is you'll see all of these taken apart, sitting in the parking lot until they're moved, and then you'll see 6 of these units sitting in the parking lot until we can prep all the site and get most of the site ready, because we've also got to put concrete pads underneath these. It's going to be pretty extensive, running water and sewer and some of the other things that we need, especially over to where this one's been moved, this 10-room cluster. I think most everything we've already done will help out here because water and sewer already exist and a lot of the electricity and utilities, but over here we'll have to run some more, do some more site work.
and who helped us design this? I forget.
This was Stephen Blatt Architects. I've worked with them for a number of years.
Okay,
On a lot of these projects.
all right.
Pat Carroll, who works with them, is he's basically their landscape individual, and, Steve Blatt, quite frankly, I rely on him a lot for a lot of these things and exterior things around campus.
Thank you.
Under this proposal, do we know what classes are where as far as grade levels?
We don't have that information yet. We'll be working on that.
Is that something that's gonna be part of before anything goes forward as far as we're knowing that?
I think we got the board that we're
Yeah,
talking.
well,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll open it up. I'll open it up for more questions after the presentation, if you like, sure. Yep.
I was just curious because I thought in past conversation we had talked about maybe having the portables down on the edge of the outfield. So I'm just curious what led to this configuration.
It wasn't gonna fit. When we started laying things out, it wasn't gonna fit in through here with the 12-room and the 10-room. And then the other idea was to try and keep the modulars as close to the building as we could for security reasons. They have to be 20 feet off the building. But when you start putting modulars down here, they become more and more, the students and the staff become more and more disconnected from the actual building itself. So trying to keep them around in that area makes a lot of sense.
As far as ball field, just run rampant for 10 full minutes and get out all your energy kind of space. Will teachers be able to access the middle school ball field during the day at all? I mean, obviously we're not going to have kids going over there during recess, but what kind of just open space will there be?
School uses that space across the access road a lot. I know MIW is used on occasion, but I believe, if you can correct me, guys, I believe right now, a lot of times we go across the street and we go up into the track and the field that's within the track to do, space in that area.
Okay.
And we are going from 20,000 to 30,000 square feet, so
That's what
we're losing our ball field, but that's an improvement.
And thank you for all the work that went into this. Just, I mean, this is a lot of problem solving, so thank you for this.
And then the staff, because people always ask will staff have for input? There's a playground committee that's been coordinated at Mabel I. Wilson School, and so they'll be able to work with their administration there, Corey and Mallory, and they'll be able to talk about playground equipment, some of the structures and some of the things for the playground that are doable. So,
That was the only last thing that I wanted to add is that I would hope that any new equipment that we ordered, that we could make sure that it's accessible for all of our students.
So I'm actually pretty excited about the playground reconfiguration. It sounds pretty significant. I would imagine that the playground is going to be offline for the entirety of the summer, right?
This playground out here will be offline, I would imagine, yeah. We won't have tunnel down for the summer.
Okay. With the expectation that the new one would be ready by the start of school?
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, it'll probably be ready even sooner than that, because we have to get that one and all of this work done before we can do this up here, so.
Ah.
Would be my guess, there'll be some pieces that have moved, so. But yes, the intent is to have it ready for the start of the school year. It's a lot of work going on this summer.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a busy summer again. We've had some busy summers, but this one's, I think, gonna be a kicker for us.
Scott, the walkways, I know it was mentioned at the middle school they were going to be covered to the portables. Will these walkways be
Yeah,
covered?
these are don't pay a lot of attention to the way these are laid out, but these are the ramps, and they have to meet a certain ADA or handicap accessibility. But what we're looking at doing is covering over these ramps, so we won't have all the snow and the slippage on them. So we're looking to either enclose them completely or just roof them. So each one of these ramps that come out on each end.
Other questions from the board, comments? Okay, do we want to move to year 2 and beyond?
So not the most ideal situation, but I think the best use of space at Mabel I. Wilson School, and in being able to provide this for the next 5 years, at least, in terms of waiting for a new school. We think this is the best plan we've got. So I want to thank Scott and Stephen Blatt, architects, for all their work on this. This is a lot to really look at what we can actually do. Wilson, because of the 8 years that we have been doing all kinds of different reconfigurations of space, felt that it was the most compelling to make sure that we address the Wilson space issues first, and that was phase 1. So phase 2 would be Greeley Middle School, which would be the summer of 2024. So about 18 months from now. And the middle school is on the verge or cusp of some very significant enrollment gains, but they're not quite there. We're right there on the verge. We've had some outgrowth over the last couple of years. They outgrew their program capacity, not their architectural capacity, which is 795 is the architectural capacity for Greeley Middle School 4-8. But the program capacity is about 750 is our estimate. And that's because of all the new programming that has come online over the last 18 years since the building was built. There's been a steady rise in enrollment that will be, that's projected starting in 2024-25. We've seen a little bit of incremental enrollment shifts over the last couple of years, but we're about to start in on a large shift. Projected enrollment is expected to rise by 213 students before 2028-29. If you think about the enrollment growth at Mabel I. Wilson School since 2015, that pretty much mirrors that full extent of that enrollment coming through now and being steady. We're seeing a steady enrollment increase, and then it stays. It's not something that we see the increase and then it drops. This is steady enrollment increase going all the way through. The main building is starting to become very cramped, as well as the Wilson School was, and it is beginning already to not be conducive to today's programming. Currently, we have 6 modular rooms helping outside the main building. We have world languages out there right now. So phase 2 in the summer of 2024, we would remove those 6 rooms, those singular rooms, and replace it with a 10 or 12 classroom building, just like we would at Mabel I. Wilson School. And then I will say this, depending on what the board's long-term plan is, and I know that you begin those discussions next week, by the summer of 2026, going into the school year 26-27, we have another large enrollment increase that we're going to have to pay attention to. So, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. So here's the enrollment for Greeley Middle School 4-8. So this is the entire facility. We have 2 schools, obviously, in that building. And you'll see that right now, we're at 795 students at the school 4-8. And that enrollment has been relatively flat since 2011. We had a little increase right in 2013-14, but it has remained at the 800 mark, just under 800 student mark for quite a while. And you'll see the program capacity mark is about 750, again, for capacity. So we've been just a little bit over, and because we knew the enrollment was coming, we started acting on that a couple of years ago, realizing that we can't keep up with the programming that we've got in the school without making those additional modular adjustments, which we did 2 years ago. So you'll see the enrollment, much like Wilson did. The middle school will be going through a similar period, starting really by 2024. It'll go up a little bit more next year, and then 2024-25, there will be a large and steep increase for a couple of years, up to 922 students pretty quickly. So within a 2-year period of time, we'll go from around 800 students to 922 students. And these are all projected numbers based on enrollment reports, but if you look at our numbers that we already have in our school district right now, that makes sense. And then by 2028-29, there will be 1,008 students at Greeley Middle School. So there'll be another, about 100 students after that first initial increase, be another one. And again, that mirrors all the student enrollment that we've got coming through, plus the projections that we were given. So we know that this is something we need to pay attention to. And depending on what the board chooses to do long-term, will impact whether another second unit of 10 or 12 rooms needs to be put in at Greeley Middle School somewhere around 2026-27. If there is a decision to go out to referendum and bond and start moving that process quicker, we'd have to look at how many units we'd have to actually put there in 2026-27. But right now, based on what's there, that's something we'll have to monitor very carefully. So Scott's going to again talk about the Greeley Middle School plan, but just keep in mind this is phase 2, and this would not be, we're not proposing that this work occurs until the summer of 2024. In other words, we're leaving the 6 rooms we've got at the middle school for 1 more year and then addressing the middle school in a year.
Thank you, Jeff. I was told that they couldn't hear me at home, so I'll grab this long mic to talk into. So the proposal at Greeley Middle School is currently 3 modular classrooms, 3 modular buildings representing 6 classrooms behind Greeley Middle School. One located here, 20 feet apart, another one here, and then another one here. So what we're proposing is removing those 3 buildings, not this summer, but the following summer, and then putting in a 12-room cluster, much like you saw at Mabel I. Wilson School. The current modulars at Greeley Middle School do not have bathrooms in them, and so that's created a problem for us in terms of, students needing to go in and out of the actual large building. Limits the grade levels that we can put in this building in terms of, if it was 4-5 or whether 6-8, and so what we're proposing also is running water and sewer to that location, which would have to come from this side of the building and come around. So we literally trench. On top of that, the modulars, which I didn't mention earlier, all of the modulars by fire code now have to be sprinkled. So we'd have to run sprinkler lines into the building and sprinkle the building as well. We'd also bring out, all of the utilities, and so this unit would encroach on the infield of the existing softball field. And if you know where this is the walkway that runs from the middle school up to the hill, kind of goes up to the top where the field house is. And so that's what we'd be proposing in the second year. I think that's about it for the middle school, if anybody has any questions. What it does do is it does preserve the field space for play area and for rec, so it does preserve that. If we do have to add a second one, I'm afraid that it would probably encroach over here and take some of this field space. Okay.
Scott, so the reason for waiting till summer of '24 is just going back to Jeff's projection of number of students. Basically, we can get by for another year.
Correct.
And then it
yeah.
starts
We
to.
can stagger this over a few years in order to make that happen. Any other questions on the middle school?
In the interim, the current modulars, are we able to put some coverings over the ramps?
Be quite a bit of construction to do that. We could, if we wanted to. I think it would be, I would prefer not doing it because I think it would be just resources wasted when we're just waiting one more year. I think we could continue to, you know, try to keep those clean.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yep. All right, any other questions on that? Do I need to go back to Mabel I. Wilson because they couldn't hear me at home, or should I just continue? Okay. Do you want to click us back through? Okay, and I'll just touch on that and just do a real quick summary. I think we need a handheld mic, Ryan.
It's like a 1950s talk show host.
Oh, it's like
Bob Barker.
it's like pretty crazy. So just to summarize again, we're looking at moving the 10-room cluster that is where this M12 is now, turning it sideways against the building, which would basically move the 10-room cluster here, add a new 12-room cluster in its place. We would be displacing the Tuttletown, but we'd also be building a new playground down in this area of the ball field. This modular comes down a little bit to impact the infield area. We end up with all of this play space that's available. We'll move the fence out so that we gain this outfield area. We're actually going to put a skinny mix over the top of this so that we do some pavement here and regain this hard space for play area. And then we'll also add a pre-K area, pre-K playground area right outside the door from the pre-K room. So in essence, what happens is we are adding, by removing these two modulars that exist now, we'll literally be adding 8 classrooms when you net everything out. So that's it.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, so areas this plan does not address, we will continue with the modular setup in this plan. Common space, as we mentioned earlier, gym, cafeteria, we're not able to address those areas. We're just addressing instructional space. We will be taking up space for play areas and green space, as we've shown you, but we've tried to minimize the impact as much as possible. But the bottom line is we have taken and will continue taking space for instructional classrooms. Safety and security considerations, even though we'll be putting cameras in, we will be having locked doors on either end, and these larger units are more secure because they only have 2 end doors and swipe cards in a security system. They're still not part of the main building, and we're just being very honest. It's not the same as being inside the main school building, but it's as good as we can make it with the space. There's some inefficiency. We've seen that for years and years now. A lot of foot traffic. We're trying to minimize that by putting bathrooms now and having bathrooms in the units that we're putting in with the short-term plan. But there is lost foot traffic going back into the main building for whatever. I suppose it's a small break for students as well to be able to walk back and forth. Disconnected for staff, disconnected to their colleagues if their classroom is in a different place. One of the good things that we've been able to do with the larger unit at Mabel I. Wilson School is that all of the second grade teachers are in that hallway. All of the second grade students are in that hallway so they can see their friends in between during breaks and whatnot in the hallway. So that has worked out better, but there's still a disconnect to the other areas of the building. Noise from the playgrounds, this certainly has a learning impact even with the main building with windows that are up against a play area, but with modulars, it's a little bit more of an impact, and we've tried to situate these new units in places that will have less impact from play areas, but still we can't completely get rid of that. The classroom walls are not as insulated as in the main building. I think these are a lot of obvious points, but we're just pointing that out. Typically, modular classrooms run a little bit smaller than in the main building. Not always. There are certainly cases where there's classrooms in the main building that are actually smaller than modulars, but generally speaking, that's the case. And that's why we also put, we need to keep our class sizes a little bit smaller in the modular units. Reduced storage space and cabinetry. I think we've done a good job trying to help as much as possible, and we will certainly be putting cabinetry and as much storage space into these modular rooms, but they're not like the main building where those are built in. Maintenance issues are more prevalent over the weekend. We mentioned that there was a cold weather issue with the gas line going out to the modulars. You know, thankfully we got it fixed in time, but when you have modular classrooms and units, you are going to have more of those happening. And then finally, just the sunk costs. Sunk costs meaning, you know, these are leases, just like you would if you have an apartment and you don't own it. Obviously, you're leasing. Just the sheer cost of it, you're not able to turn around and have it as an asset at the end of the day. And there's a lot of money that goes into setting these up, and that's why we want to do it once for the short-term plan and get it done. And so those setup costs don't keep recurring as we've tried to patch together things over the last few years. We want this to be a plan that is there for a number of years. We do it once, we do it right at Mabel I. Wilson School and try to minimize, but there are setup costs, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So the actual cost in the budget, these are estimated costs. They're not really estimated. They're pretty close to what they would be for actual, but looking at the phase-in of the cost for being able to complete this plan over the 5 years. For fiscal year 2024, which will be starting the summer of 2023, obviously, for the 2023-24 school year, adding another unit, 12 rooms at the Mabel I. Wilson School, removing the 2 smaller units, moving and rebuilding the playground, and resurfacing the play areas and expanding the fence line, which Scott talked about. All of those things all told, we would be paying $250,000 out of the general fund for the lease, just the straight lease of that unit. And this is additional money for this second unit. We're not talking about the first unit that's already there. We're already paying on that. It would be a 5-year term, and it would be $1.25 million for that particular unit over the full life of that 5-year term. Plus, the capital costs is $1.423 million, and that includes rebuilding the playground, that includes the fence line, resurfacing, all the other things, getting the units there, and setting them up, putting them on concrete pads, et cetera. So that's a one-time cost on the capital block, but you'll see that those 2 costs go together, and that one-time cost for capital is something we won't have to carry forward. In 2025, for the fiscal year 25, which is the summer of 24, put the Greeley Middle School unit number 1 in and take out the 3 smaller units. Again, it's $250,000 out of the general fund, and that's for 4 years. I'm talking about a 5-year plan. Now we're 1 year in, that's 4 years. That's $1 million over the 4 years. Plus there's $987,000 in estimated setup costs, including getting it there, putting it on concrete pads, moving the small ones out, et cetera. So that would be the cost that would come out of, we're proposing out of capital reserve. And then in 2027, fiscal year 27, again, we talked about that second 10 or 12 room unit at Greeley Middle School. If we need to do that, that would be something we would have to talk about the cost going forward. It all depends on what the board's long-term plan will be. So we put a TBA just as a placeholder, and if we have to discuss it later, we will do that. But the total cost out of the general fund for just leasing of these 2 units, additional money that we will need to take from the general fund over the next 5 years, is $2,250,000. For capital reserves, it will be $2,410,000. So the total cost over the 5 years between the general fund lease and the capital reserves for completing all of the site work and setup costs, transporting the modulars back and forth, et cetera, from the company, will be $4,660,000 for the 5 years. Scott, do you want to add anything else to the financial piece?
Can I ask a question?
Mike, sorry, I didn't know where it was coming from.
Yeah, that's okay. It's very weird, the acoustics. My memory serves me correct, that we currently pay something like $300,000 a year.
$335,000 a year.
This is going to be on order of like 450 to 475 or so. Just trying to do the math for the leasing part of it, not including the reserve fund. Is that right? Per year?
So the $250,000 is a lease per unit, additional.
Right, and then starting the next year, it'd be an additional 250,000.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so we're looking at by 2025, FY 2025, it's 500K a year.
And these are additional costs, so it doesn't even take into account the $335,000 that we're currently paying on our modulars right now.
This is 500K additional.
Correct.
Oof. And then the capital reserve fund that we had is it's like
We have around $5 million.
which we were going to use to soften for the new building project the first beginning
That's right.
years.
But we were going to use that money to help stop, but obviously with the referendum not passing and our immediate needs being very important for the next
Yes.
5 years, that $5 million needs to be used in a different way. So we will be using obviously $2.4 million of that money over the next 5 years in order to help with these costs. And Scott, I think Scott's gonna. Did you want to add something to that?
Yeah. What I would mention is that, as the board knows and many of the community knows, we were setting those funds aside to offset the budget as we were taking on additional debt with that stepped and tiered debt service plan. Losing these funds to do this short-term project, we don't have that opportunity to offset that debt service enough. So not having been able to move the project forward will result in using those unallocated fund balances, transferring them to a capital reserve account, and using them to pay for the capital cost affiliated with this short-term plan.
I also just had a question because I thought we were also looking into whether it made more fiscal sense for us just to purchase the units outright versus leasing. So can you tell me how you landed on the decision just to continue leasing?
Yeah, the leasing cost, one, if we purchase the items outright, it'll literally wipe us out of our reserve account, okay, and eliminate our fund balance altogether, and which is a place we don't want to be in. The other thing is, at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that those modulars end up being an asset at the end of the day. We'd have to figure out how to get rid of them, what to do, selling them off, and at that point, the tear down cost may exceed, or the moving cost may exceed the value at the end of the day.
Scott, have you been able to figure out what will the savings be, if any, getting rid of those 4 from Maple Wilson, right? We're losing those 4.
I made that assumption in the numbers that I put up there, is I tried to net those out with any savings from reducing the other modulars.
Okay.
And just so everyone knows, these are brand new units. They're custom built to our specs. They're brand new and they're delivered on site. So it's not as though we're getting a hand-me-down from another district where they're 20 years old and falling apart. We've had to rehab some of the older ones that are on the campus. They haven't been the best of units, so.
And we have to do this just in case in 5 years the new school doesn't pass again. That we need these buildings to be able to be sustainable
They
longer.
need to be able to be sustainable, and quite frankly, we really don't have any other choice going forward because we're out of space.
Yep.
And we need to address that now. So regardless of grade configurations, other questions that are happening, we have no space. And so it's time to move forward and create space. Okay.
So I know that gentleman over here asked what grades would be out at the Mabel I. Wilson School. It's going to be the older grades. We always try to keep the younger students in the main building, and the older students would be out in the modulars. Is typically how we've looked at it. Oh, Scott has something else you'd like to add.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I did want to add that one of the disadvantages we've had is we haven't been able to get state subsidy on these temporary spaces because we took immense advantage of that in the past. And, but since we haven't taken advantage of that in a number of years, today I had a conversation with DOE and the person who handles all the oversight of the funds for these. And I do believe there's a strong possibility that we can get state subsidy on these modulars, but they're always 1 year removed. So we would apply this summer, but yet the subsidy wouldn't come in place until the following year. And so we just put those forward and apply for those. So that's one of the things today, and they do it on basically a certain dollar amount per square foot. So I'm sure we won't get all of it subsidized, and the setup costs are not subsidized, but maybe we can get the leases subsidized to help us out a little bit, existing leases and new ones.
So the next steps, we have a few next steps just to talk about. The board will be asked to vote on this plan in a week, and I will send you this presentation. It wasn't in your packet. Scott and I have been working on it today as well, just to finalize everything, so you will get it tonight. I believe Jason has scheduling a vote for next Monday evening, February 13th, for the board to vote on this. The importance of the vote coming sooner than later is that we have to lock in the modular leases and arrangements with Scavi, the company that we're working with, the contractor, and get everything else in place as well, the setup. There's so many things that go along with this. There has to be a lot of lead time in order for us to be able to make all this work. So that's why we're asking the board to vote sooner than later on this plan. Also next Monday evening, as you know, there's a workshop to define the process for the board in the long-term major capital plan, looking ahead. You know, what does that referendum or plan look like in developing a new plan for a new school? And finally, Scott and I will be conferring with the town of Cumberland, the planner and the manager, around the updated site plan, finding out what the next steps are. Do we need to go to the planning board? Is this something that can be handled through the planner's office? We'll be doing that in very short order to get that going. Town has always worked very well with us on this, so we don't expect any glitches, but just want to make you aware that is one of our steps that we go through. So that's the short-term facilities plan, and Scott and I are available to answer any questions. Go back to any slides you like, and again, we will be sending this presentation tonight to you so that you have it, so you can really look through it.
Will this presentation also be available for the public, possibly on our what was our the referendum website? Can we start kind of building that up a bit?
And it will be in, I forgot to mention this, it will be in this week's newsletter as a link.
Great.
So that people can look at it. It will be proposed at that point because it hasn't been approved. But we'll put that as a proposed plan so people can look at it, and then we'll be also isolating this presentation from tonight and putting that as a link for people to look at.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments from the board? Okay, I'm happy to open it up to public comment. This is important stuff. If anybody would like to speak, have questions.
We'll hand the podium over so people can come up.
Okay. Seeing, yeah, step up please so that people could hear you at home.
When you said the walkways would be covered, do you mean covered from the portable to the main building?
No.
Okay.
No, they have to, just because of some of the rules around how you connect buildings, they have to be 20 feet off of the main buildings. It'll be just the actual ramps, the ADA ramps, and going up. So like, you know, the little L that goes up would be covered, okay?
Can we look at having them covered, at least somewhat, to the buildings so they don't get all wet all the time?
Yeah, we had issue with that when we tried to do that before. I can certainly look into it again, but I can tell you that there's issues with trying to connect them to the building.
I mean, if there's any way the sidewalks join, if they joined at any point to some common door, maybe at that point?
Yeah, we can take a look at it. I can tell you we haven't been successful with it in the past, though.
Okay.
But we can certainly look at it.
Any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Further questions, comments, concerns from the board?
Appreciate the work that was done on this. It's a really difficult situation, right? So appreciate the time, effort put into it.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this short term is now sort of a longer term, short term, because of the failure of the referendum. You know, we would have been doing things differently a little bit this summer and going forward if we knew, if we had a building in sight, sort of. Scott, I would like to understand fully the cost of build, own versus lease, because my only fear is, you know, to Ann's point, is this is 5 years and maybe the numbers look different at the 5-year mark, but if we go, you know, years 6 through 10, if we still have to use these,
Sure.
then we might own them at year 5, but if we're leasing them, that's just more sunk cost. So.
Yeah, I've pursued a conversation with Doton's Construction about stick building them on site and building them in a fashion of a modular that can be taken apart and moved at another time. The other one is I'm waiting for Schiavi to get back to me on what we could purchase one of those outright for. So as soon as I have that information, I'll share it with the board. It's I know that the one that I got just to purchase the unit outright, it was close to $2.4 million to purchase it with stick built on site and the concrete and some of the other things. So.
And we can't amortize that in any way?
We could. I could look at we'd have to look at how we break out some of the costs that are affiliated with the purchase, because I don't have those broken out separately. We could look at amortizing that and doing a rent to own, I believe, through somebody like a Doton's, or I could look at doing a lease purchase option with somebody like Androscoggin Savings. Okay, and looking at doing that by us getting the units and then being able to do that. So, so there may be the opportunity to do that without having to just lease it outright, but be able to pay for it over a period of 5 years and own it at the end of that time. Certainly the payment will be higher and affect our general fund, but that's certainly an option that I can put together.
Mike?
I think it's very reasonable and smart to look at that costing, but I just want to note how skeptical I am of purchasing it. And I mean, this should be seen completely as a short-term step to moving to a referendum within the next few years, and then hopefully moving into a new building in 5-ish years. Really, we should only be thinking about this. This is the best Band-Aid we can put together right now. And so I understand your questioning, Jason, and I think it's worth looking at the numbers, but when you're like 6 through 10, it just made my stomach turn into a knot. I understand it's reality, but it's awful. And so I think everything should be pointed towards not that, if we can.
Yeah. So we have a finance committee meeting coming up, and I would expect that I should have some numbers by then that I can share with finance and take a look at that.
Okay.
I agree with you, Mike, as well. Just had to say that. 10 years.
I just
Well,
want
we
to
just
see
don't
the
want to
numbers.
lose. We just don't want to lose
Just
sight
wanna
that
see the
we're
numbers.
a 4 district.
That would be money in our pocket
We're a
years 5, 6,
4-school
and 7.
district. Not really.
Oh,
We're a 4-school district.
I'm not in favor of making it any longer than it needs to be. I just want to understand the numbers. Make sure we're doing what we should be. Okay. And the reason I wanted to postpone the vote on this short-term plan was just really to give you guys a week to absorb it. So that'll be at our workshop. There will be one action item on there. And the rest of that workshop is really just defining the process. We won't be getting too far into the weeds next week. Defining the process of what the next few years looks like.